I am officially offering one-to-ones. I came to find that a lot of what people were asking the Dibia was not necessarily Dibia work. There were questions I could have answered for them, or there was no question at all. It was just more so a need for clarity, which I can most definitely help in that aspect, using a one-to-one session app known as People Talk. The link is below, and you can ask a one-off question with the app, or you can schedule a 30-minute one-to-one. But of course, if we need to go a little bit over, I'm very okay with that. Now, if you need to understand your current situation spiritually from an ancestral perspective, or maybe you feel that you have the calling to be a Dibia or some type of calling you're not able to decode, or you're receiving messages that aren't 100% clear and you want to know what to do next, or maybe you have general questions about Odinani and Igbo spirituality, as well as how to apply these principles to solving internal and external conflicts, and feel that a solution rooted in ancestral science will be best, you can schedule a meeting at peopletalk.com/themedicineshow. And like I said, the link is below. And so that is peopletalk/themedicinесhow. Pricing is different for AZ tier patrons. So if you're an AZ tier patron, message me first. The last big announcement. I am currently working on a documentary. It is my next documentary, and the topic will be the Ekumeku resistance waged in the Anyama region of Igbo land against the British Empire. But this documentary will go a lot further than that. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to explore secret fighting societies and cults of resistance, not just in Igbo land, but in North America, the Caribbean, South America, and throughout the African continent. So if you're interested in seeing this documentary, you can help us reach 300 patrons by joining patreon.com/themedicineshow. This is my first documentary since the Osu Explained video, which I've linked below, and I'm going all out with this one. I'm very confident you'll be happy about the final result. And with that being said, let's begin. Number 3 is that you are not in righteous standing, or you have not kept to your awful. In the ancestral view of justice, justice is delineated by a principle of 2 things, awful and ogun, together known as awful and ogun. Awful is an oath by which justice is built, typically symbolized by a rod or a staff, with ogun being the retributive or balancing principle of the justice, or of the awful. When an individual is born, they make a pact with creation to keep a certain awful or a certain set of principles by which they will live when they are on earth. When these principles are kept, they are protected on a celestial level by the ogun of that principle, of that pact. Or put simply, just living shields you from injustice. Unjust living blocks you from justice. Or as the Ilu says, fire cannot cross the waters to kill a frog. At the same time, because your awful is a pact you made with creation, acting outside of your awful breaks the accord you have with creation, and therefore makes it more difficult, if not impossible, to receive what you want from the universe. Your awfondo, sometimes known as your Iuwa, your universal stream, serves as a relationship balancer between you and creation, to the extent that even that which is on your path and that which has been created for you or left on your path for your chi cannot be received if you are not in righteous accord with your awful or with creation itself. When an individual is reincarnated, their onyuwa, the parcel of their spirit which reincarnates, returns to their chi. Their chi then gives them their purpose for existing and the path by which they will walk when they are on the earth. After this is given, the chi and the onyuwa return into creation, or Eke. From there, they negotiate the terms by which they will live on the earth. Eke allows an individual to receive what their chi has left for them, so long as they keep to the awful that they then receive upon agreeing to live a righteous life once on earth. Now, on a very day-to-day level, we can look at the example of parents and children. In most cases, it's very hard for a child to knock over your TV and then immediately turn around and start asking you for ice cream. Or a parent can send a child on an errand, and instead of doing the errand, the child then starts asking for something else. Now, all this is subjective, and everybody parents the way they want to parent. But most often, or most typically, the child has a better chance of receiving things that are additional from the parents if they're not knocking over TVs, if they're actually doing what the parents ask them to do. It is much harder for a child to ask for, I don't know, an Xbox if they come home with good grades, rather than if they come home in the back of a police car. But again, styles differ. I've seen some things in my life, so yeah. Now, if an individual's ancestors have sent them to do something very specific, and rather than doing it, you are going to your altar and trying to manifest or asking for something else, you have come into conflict with your ancestors. And oftentimes the good will not be received, or the thing you're wanting will not be received until you do the very specific thing your ancestors ask you. For many individuals who are destined to become Is and Y or Dibias, their lives are usually marred with a lot of failure, a lot of struggle, confusion, frustration, and even challenges with mental health. And this is because their Agun, which is also that Onyowa that I spoke of earlier, has come into the world to do a very specific thing, which they themselves are not doing. Now, typically, in order to end these challenges, an individual will perform a ceremony known as Iragun, or working with Agun, sometimes referred to as making peace with Agun, where after an individual accepts their calling, the things that they were previously trying to do but were meeting a lot of frustrations with suddenly become a lot easier and more attainable since that person has held their end of the accord or has kept to their awful. It is also important to remember that in the Igbo worldview, justice and morality, or an individual's principles, has a particularly close and inseparable relationship with the idea of responsibility, meaning that just or righteous behavior is the keeping of a responsibility or the keeping of a pact or keeping of your word. So that if I am a father or I call myself a father, my capacity to act as a father is what makes me just or principled. Now, all things, just like individuals, come into the world the exact same way, with an awful, meaning that if I'm calling myself a father, that declaration is an awful, and there's an ogun that comes with the authority. If I am executing my duties as a father in a correct way, I will receive, maybe say, the respect from my spouse and child that is accorded to a father. I will hold my household together, and in general, my household will be protected by the ogun of my righteous behavior, or my keeping of the responsibility. If I'm not keeping the awful of fatherhood, my household will fall apart. My children will not respect me. My spouse will want nothing to do with me. An individual's capacity to keep awful on one level of receiving opens them up to receiving on a higher level. So returning to the parent analogy, now let's say a parent has multiple kids, and after a while you realize one is responsible enough to clean up the household when you're gone, to shut the TVs off at a certain time, and to take everybody else to bed as well. Because that child has shown responsibility, more responsibility is typically placed on them. And that responsibility, or awful, also comes with a certain set of authority. So that after a while, this child becomes the leader because they are able to act as a leader. Now, when you approach your altar, there are several awful that are connected to you as a person. And there's the awful of the various blessings and responsibilities that you have received in the world. If you are not in righteous standing with those awful or your own awful to ask for more from your altar, your ancestors or creation itself cannot and will not give you more, as the awful is handed to an individual for the purpose of being a custodian. The universe will give you in order for you to take care of its children with what is given. But the ability to keep akankumoto begins small, when an individual is able to keep the awful of the various relationships and titles they have taken on themselves, be it daughter, student, Christian, Muslim, honest, or brave. The keeper of their principles, or the holder of the akankumoto, becomes the hand by which the universe trusts to receive great power and great things, as they are more likely to use it in custodianship or care for the rest of humanity and others. Very similar to how an individual will give a babysitter the remote and the keys to the house, and maybe even access to a little money. Now, that remote, the keys, and the money are not necessarily for the babysitter, but rather for the babysitter to execute the responsibility of taking care of the children well. So that if your ancestors give you wisdom, that wisdom is for the service of the family. If your ancestors give you wealth, that wealth is for the sustenance of the poor. If your ancestors give you height, that height is for the protection of the short. If your ancestors give you love, that love is to teach you how to spread it to the unloved, and so forth. So that all blessings in the ancestral realm are an awful, including the blessings that you currently have, or the identifying markers of you as a person. And if you are keeping to that which you have promised to keep, the universe will open so that you can receive more. This concept is known as akankumoto. Akankumoto is a principle or a philosophy that states that the upright hand is the hand that is prepared to receive blessing, meaning that an individual who is just, righteous, and responsible, as all three of these things are connected in the ancestral worldview of a just person, is a person who is capable of handling responsibility. Now, if you also understand that blessings and responsibility are tied together by our ancestors, this is also the person who is capable of handling blessings. And thus the universe puts things in the hands of that person because they are capable of using it for the service, the care, and the upkeep of the rest of humanity. A person who has akankumoto is a person who has the universe's trust because they have righteous behavior and are just. And this is reflected on a community level, as this person typically has their community's trust, on a family level, because this person will typically have their family's trust, and on an individual level, because that person will typically trust themselves. What is typically done in this situation is that before making a manifestation or before asking for something at your altar, there's a declaration of worthiness to hold that thing. This is often done by listing negations that affirm the quality of your character, such as, I have not stolen, I have not taken what is not mine, I have not harmed another or wished harm on another, I have not taken what belongs to the gods of the land, I have not associated with people of ill character, and so forth. Next is that